Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Thursday, September 12th. Derek and Riper, Sarris, Trevor May here with you today. On this episode, we're going to dig into some game theory applications of pitch sequencing, thanks to a great listener email that we received. We'll try to figure out just how far into game theory some teams actually could go with their planning process. We're going to talk about unusual approaches in training, be that tech that is cutting edge or maybe just really old, but people don't use it anymore. Going to dig into some surprising developments in the playoff race, including Atlanta sliding out of playoff position and the Tigers trying to make that late push in. And time permitting, we have our third installment of Name That Dude. Let's get started today, guys. Let's start with the game theory to determine pitch mix. We got an email from one of our listeners, Misha, pointing back to something that happens in soccer for PKs, where you have to find the ideal mix of a shooter choosing his dominant side, but not choosing it all the time to give an advantage to the keeper, right? And there's been a paper written about this and trying to find the right sweet spot, the Nash equilibrium, the point where things are actually competitively right. And this is something you can expand and turn into like a pitch sequencing conversation too. So the idea would be like having the perfect portion of your strongest pitches against the hitter you're facing to maximize your strengths, but also to apply it against their weaknesses. It's a really tough balance to find because your best pitch might be something that the hitter can crush. So you have to take that away a little bit, right? So it's always this kind of sliding scale. So just from like a broad mathematics perspective, Trevor, what's the most involved planning and processing that you know about? Are there teams using anything like game theory modeling to help determine how much they should have pitchers throwing certain pitches?
I think that there's definitely people in analytics departments that specialize in game theory. Like that's or at least have a broad interest in it and have it's a really common it's kind of obvious of a thing to add to something like baseball that has as many statistics and outcomes and like sample size of events happening in general. Game theory makes a lot of sense to attach to a game like that. The thing is, in practice, especially when it comes to pitch sequencing, the nuance and the intangible side of things will always. I think that the data attached to those things kind of just shakes out a way based on very clearly specific situations happening over and over and over again, and that's just kind of the best way to do it in terms of predictive stuff in that area. It's hard to do with any sort of certainty, but getting an underlying idea of how game theory can work and how broad trends happen is kind of, I think, how it's being put into play. The most predictive stuff, it comes down to trying to guess. Give yourself opportunities. They don't so they don't want hitters to be guess hitters. Like, we don't want guys to go up there looking for a specific pitch, meaning selling out only for that pitch, and then that's how you hit, is by just going pitch to pitch and doing that. They don't want that, but they would like to give the glaring stuff to their hitters the same way that the pitchers want the glaring stuff on the hitters. I think when we got ready for the show, Yainer Diaz was the guy I was using, and his struggles against off speed, slow changeups and splitters versus breaking balls in all counts. Like, not just, it's just there's a natural proclivity to hit it. Like, it's just clear. It's pretty clear that his swing or whatever, breaking balls are his thing. No matter how good your breaking ball is, that should give you pause because it only takes one good swing to hurt, especially reliever. So, like, that kind of stuff, even though you have a great slider, you have the best slider, you have Matt Brash's slider, right? You still might try to throw him a splitter because he's so poor. Like, so that is how you make those decisions. But then you got to factor in, like, guys' confidence levels and they're like whether or not they want to be a strike or not. And that's just going to vary wildly. So if you're trying to model things, it's hard to model in confidence and like what they might even be thinking about. Maybe they've been just watching guys throw so many sliders lately. They're just really excited about their slider. I know that's something like Joe Kelly does. He gets a pitch. He really likes throwing it. So he throws it a bunch in games. Like, it's very much he does that. And that's just the way kind of he is. And you can't really model that, right? You can't model the difference between him and, like, say or I don't even say Yu Darvish, because he's very similar like that too. But guys who just want to throw their one pitch and be done with it, be good with it. It's hard to model that stuff. So I think it's only going to go to a point. But to answer your question in very long form, Yes, it is part of it, and they're trying to find ways to do this, but I don't think they're ever going to find anything that's so far to where we can say, "Hey, just do this in this spot, and then you'll be good."
Yeah, I think it's such a moving target. I mean, you're talking about Yair Diaz, and I'm thinking like, well, he's a young player, and this is version 1 of him, right?
Yeah.
So, if he's going to be a star, then, and I don't know if he is yet, but if he is going to be a star, then at some point he's going to figure out the changeup thing, and he's going to have some sort of scoopy swing, and then he might fall in love with that for a while because people are thinking, oh, the scouting report says throw him a lot of changeups. That's the glaring thing that he's got a weakness on. Then all of a sudden he's punishing changeups for a week and he's loving it because he's got the scoopy swing. He's got that going. And then you can actually get back in there with a slider and a fastball, So there's that the pitcher is a moving target and the hitter is a moving target, and they're changing their philosophies and their approaches from game to game. You're trying to model Joe Kelly, but is it Joe Kelly who's fallen in love with the slider, or Joe Kelly who's fallen in love with his fastball? You know what I mean? Like they're human beings on both sides. So it's like they have these different emotions and adjustments that are attached to each of these things. So it's very hard to say this is, and then you have like there's sort of different day, different arm issues where it's like, yes, normally I would throw my changeup, but right now I've been throwing this like you're Trevor May and you're in 2022 or 3 when you were throwing the splitter, and you're like, normally I would throw my changeup, but it's a little funky right now because I've been throwing the splitter,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's my best pitch. So I think about guys like Cody Bellinger and how different he can be depending on what time of the year you're attacking him. And so whatever numbers you have, will kind of could go out the window. And so you do have to react to what's happening in the moment. But I do love this idea that you have to like honor your strengths enough. You have to go to your strengths enough to keep them your strengths and to keep the hitter thinking that's what's coming. I think of what I know of, one team in particular was talking to me about advanced scouting for the Dodgers. And they were talking that like, okay, so, I'm telling my pitchers, here's what to do against Freddie Freeman. We've looked at the heat maps. We've looked at he's blue here. Do this, do this. He's great here. Avoid that, try to throw your curveball in the outside corner. He'll probably spit on it. If you can land it, you get some called strikes, get him to the 2-strike count. Then you can do a little bit more. That's the whole thing, right? Well, this advanced scout said when he got into the game, it was like Freddie Freeman was sitting on the things he told his pitcher to do. And these are not Freddie Freeman's strengths, but Freddie Freeman. So his theory is that the Dodgers scout themselves and scout their hitters and tell their hitters, listen, if I was going to pitch to you and Merrill Kelly was my guy, this is what I would tell him to do to you, so that, Freddie Freeman can stand up there and be like, you know what, he's probably going to throw me an outside curve to try and get an early called strike, because normally I would sit on that. But today I'm not going to sit on it because I just got told that's my scouting report against me for Merrill Kelly. So you kind of get these things where they can anticipate better. And it's not guessing. You're right. It's not guessing willy-nilly. You don't really want them. I did make the comment that maybe pitchers should be random number generators, and maybe even hitters should be random number generators. But if you do that, then you're too random. And it's too likely that you could just miss on each guess over and over again. You kind of, there's contextual clues, how the guy looks, what he's throwing. There's your own clues. So you're kind of trying to be better than 50-50 guessing every time.
Yeah. And we had another question that came in from Adam asking about the random number generator approach to pitching and wondering how you could control for the variance in pitch quality or platoon advantage, just basic things that we understand already. Like if you had the example he sent us was if you had a righty with 4 pitches and a league average slider, would you have him still throw it 25% of the time, or would you split the distribution up differently depending on the quality of the pitches and the matchup, right? So it is a moving target for a lot of reasons. The way the Dodgers probably do scout themselves is brilliant, because then you have to use your second best or third best game plan against them. And then
you have to game plan your game plan.
Now your stuff's not as good. Like the best thing you could have done has been taken away. So now you're doing the second or third best thing. And that for a lot of players might not be nearly as effective as getting hitters out as doing the thing that you do best or trying to exploit that biggest weakness. So it just kind of goes on forever in this endless loop because of the changes. I think, Trevor, you also mentioned Joe Musgrove running into some trouble where he was cruising in a recent outing and he became a little too dependent on his cutter. And even that sort of change, it seems like a team, an opposing lineup can pick up on it really fast where, maybe your previous base pitch for high usage was a four-seamer. If you go to the cutter more often, it only takes a handful of games before teams are going to realize, okay, it's the cutter now. So because it's the cutter instead of the four-seamer, these things are all different, and now we can attack them this way. So the shelf life of an adjustment just seems like it's about as short as it's ever been in Major League Baseball.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it. We are a conversation also has been like why the hitter and the pitcher gap has kind of seemingly widened and hitting's harder. And it's like I think pitchers just are the same way that adjustments are being made quickly. Pitchers are also getting to their potential quicker, like just because of how quickly they can adjust. And hitters don't have that same space to get there. It's slower. And that's just kind of what's happening. So it's funny you bring up Musgrove too. The interesting thing was he was dominating for the first 3 innings of the game, like 9 up, 9 down, like 5-6 strikeouts. So it was almost one of those things like, hey guys, what's the worst can happen here if we're wrong and we all stop, we sit on his cutter and we're wrong, and then he just keeps doing what he's doing to us right now. So it was like one of those, hey, I mean, what do we got to lose here? And then it just flipped in the best possible way. I think he gave up 7 hits in like 12 pitches in a row. And some of them were good pitches, other than weren't very well located, but they also just got there was some luck involved, and there was some like, that location, that pitch, me sitting on it was perfect. And but what, as a pitcher, you go and it's so jarring that you're like, I mean, was I tipping? Like, it's the first thing you think, because that stuff doesn't happen very often, but sometimes they just change their approach a little bit, and then they get all of those outcomes the best way possible for them all together at once too. So it just seems like this crazy thing, when in reality it was just the nature of you do this enough, that's going to happen like once or twice in your career, where you're just going to go and just be like, what just happened to me? It happened to me once too. And out of the bullpen, 10 pitches, gave up like 4 runs and 5 hits and had no clue what just happened to me. So that's the randomness, like that's the part of it, but you just have to try to make the best decisions that you can make to avoid that from happening. And the thing about that outing, when we're talking about his last start, he did a couple things where you could tell maybe he got away, like he started second guessing and tried some other things that he wouldn't have tried before because things were happening so quickly, which then made it worse. And that's the hard part, to make those adjustments. But you just kind of like learn. There's a couple mistakes he made, but most of it was them just getting him, and you got to tip your cap, and that sucks. And no pitcher wants to do that, but that's the nature of it. And so there's no model that would have been able to predict. There's no way anyone would be able to predict that what happened to him happened the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of random number generator, he's a decent example of it. From the outside, it seems. I'm trying. It is actually really hard to figure out what he's throwing right now, because he's throwing a pitch that's not showing up on Fangraphs or Baseball Savant. Right now, he's throwing an 86-mile-an-hour gyro slider that he wasn't throwing before, and I think it's being picked up in the cutter. So, in the last game, it says cutter 31%, but that's not right. It says four seam 25%. It says curveball 23%, sweeper 15%, sinker 7%, and changeup 5%. I mean, this is what you're talking about a little bit with, like, in terms of relative to strengths. This is almost as random number generated as you can get. Your 3 best pitches, you're throwing 25% of the time, and then you're sneaking in your lesser pitches every once in a while to keep them honest. And there's even a slider in there that maybe some advanced scouts are catching and some aren't, like, because he's only been throwing it for 2 or 3 starts. So, you'd think that he would be good at this, and yet the hitter still picked up. He trusts his cutter more than his four seam. I don't know if it's count based or, and maybe they even had this idea that you said of like, well, it's not working sitting 4. So I'm just going to try sitting cutter, and if you sit cutter, you're sitting 88, 89. Maybe it's easier to adjust to the sweeper at 83 and the gyro at 86 than if you're trying to sit fastball 93, 94 and adjust down to all those other things. So it's being a random number generator is really hard. I'm also thinking of Spencer Swanbach, who's like at his core, his best pitches are his fastball and his slider. His curve and his splitter are not as good. And some days he gets in there and he's like, I cannot command the splitter at all. And so he doesn't even really throw it. And he's just fastball, slider, curve, and cutter. The cutter, the other things are not as good as his fastball, slider. But like he said to me, I'm not Spencer Strider. Like that fastball and slider are not good enough to be a 50-50 guy. So he's pretty close to 25, despite some of those pitches not being as good. So answer that question, I would say yes. If you have a league average slider as a righty and your other 3 pitches are better, I still throw the slider 25% of the time because A, it's not a detriment. It's at least league average. And then B, they have to honor all 4 pitches. If you start throwing that down to 10%, they're just never going to prepare for it. They're never going to care about it. They're just going to be like, oops, maybe I gave up a called strike on that because I wasn't prepared for it, but I don't care about it because he really throws the other pitches 90% of the time. And that's what I'm going to care about.
I think it's also a little easier for the game theory example to think about it with a 2-pitch reliever. Like Devin Williams is purely fastball changeup right now. And he's actually throwing more fastballs than changeups this year. He's like 55-45. I was just watching him pitch against the Giants 2 nights ago. And it's hard in particular, I think, when you lose command of one of those pitches, if you're not landing one and then you're kind of boxed in, you start falling behind in a count.
Then you're a 1-pitch pitcher.
Then you become a 1-pitch pitcher, and that's the absolute worst possible thing. But when both of those pitches are working, I think it's easier to think about the different lens of, okay, even though the airbender is the better pitch in a vacuum, you still probably use the fastball more than you might otherwise because of how it interacts with the other pitch. Like you can't rely too heavily on that amazing pitch because then guys can sit on that airbender and actually do a little something with it. Or if he can't land it, then you're getting a fastball and you run into a huge problem there. So it's just a lot to think about here, just in terms of different problems that pitchers are going to run into and different ways to work through them.
I think the count is a big sort of factor here. And, we're talking about being, I guess, being predictable in counts, and Musgrove maybe being more predictable with the cutter in counts. Like if you zoom out and you say, oh, he's a perfect 25 guy, like this should be perfect. Yes. But is he in each count? Does he he's in these situations where he needs it? Is it mid count? Trevor always talks about mid count, early count, and behind the count is obvious. We talked about, Pierce Johnson going to his elite curveball 90% of the time in 2-0 and 2-1 counts and giving up a 700 slugging on it. So the count is a big way in. I was watching Darvish pitch to Cal Raleigh, and on a 2-1 count, he threw a slider that was, if you just looked at it without any sort of knowledge about what was going on, it was a slider at the bottom edge of the zone. I mean, maybe it could have been further outside, but it was from a righty to a lefty. So it was, it was a pretty well put slider. It was on the black on the bottom of the zone in a 2-1 count. And you think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that would have been innovative enough for the hitter to be like, damn, I thought I was getting a fastball. But now Cal Raleigh was like, it's a 2-1 count, I'm getting a slider. And if you look at Darvish's tendencies, that actually fits. He throws his slider twice as often as his fastball in 2-1 counts. So Cal Raleigh sat slider, and though it was like a good pitch in the vacuum, he hit it out for a dinger. So it is one of those things where you get comfortable, you've had success, you want to go do things that you want to do, and then could he have dropped that slider further down? Yes, but then maybe Cal Raleigh would have spit on it, and then it would have been 3-1. So the count is this huge thing. A lot of times people forget to adjust for it in their analysis, and it's a huge confounding factor.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that a guy like Darvish with so many pitches could end up falling into a pattern that gives hitters a little bit of an advantage like that in a situation. But that clearly looks like what happened in that matchup against Cal Raleigh. We had a good question come in from Discord. Rambo Van Dam, who probably has the best handle in the Discord right now. Can a pitcher with great command actually be a detriment? If I'm pitching and I can put it exactly where I want it, wouldn't hitters pick up on trends more easily? If I'm pitching and I have no idea where the ball is going, neither do the batters. So Trevor, is there a level of command that can start to work against you a little bit, either in terms of predictability or maybe even just in terms of, I don't know, maybe falling into a pattern, like thinking you can live a little more in the zone than you have to, even in some cases? Like, it's a strange question, but I think it's actually a really good one.
No, the term effectively wild is a real thing. It really is. When there's a little bit, it's all about creating doubt or confusion to the other side of, hitters are trying to do it, pitchers and pitchers are trying to do it to hitters. And that's the best situation you can be in when you throw a pitch they're not expecting. Like, there's nothing better than hearing like a guy. I think I did this with a splitter. This was with my splitter in 2022 before I got hurt. I think I threw it to like Brandon Crawford to end a game, a strikeout. And as he walked back to the dugout, I walked in, and I heard this anecdotally later, and he was just like, "What the F was that? Like, what was that?" He didn't know I had it. Like, I hadn't thrown it that much, and everyone knew about my changeup. So, like, when you get that comment, confidence goes up and through the roof. So, that's what you're trying to do. I think that you can throw too many strikes. You can be kind of obsessed with like not walking guys. There's sometimes it's like it's not even about really commanding the zone. Like George Kirby, for example, is the guy we were talking about when we talked about this question. He throws into a 9 pocket all off season, so hitting spots is the most important thing to him, very clearly. And he is really, it's really important that he like leads the league with the lowest walk rate. Like, he wants that. That just means he's gonna be throwing that, knowing that that is a priority to him. 2-1, you're gonna get a strike. So like, now that question's out of your head as a hitter, that can be create an advantage when you're not worried about him expanding the zone in an account where he can't afford it. He feels like he can't afford to do it because at the end of the day, he does not want to walk you. Once you understand that, it kind of tightens the strike zone streaks or shrinks a little bit for him. And you have to have the ability to be okay with like Adam Arvino talks about this, being okay with walking a guy every once in a while, like just being okay with throwing the white flag for a guy that you just don't feel like you can get right now.
Now your inner Snell.
Yeah, just be okay with it. Be okay with, okay, I would rather walk this guy than give up a double. And pick your spots there. Now, some people do that a little too much, and that can hurt you long term. But again, it's one of those things. There's no perfect way to do it. I think that guys who tend to walk really low amounts of guys. I played with Phil Hughes when he broke the record for the ratio. I walked 16 guys in 2015, and then refused to throw 1/3 of an inning to get $500,000 more because he wanted to keep the record, which is crazy. They also tend to give up more hits just in general. Like, you don't see a guy going out there throwing 200 innings, giving up 120 hits and walking 15 guys. Like, it's just
they'll give up homers too. Like Ober, like
homers.
you'll see really low walk rate guys will have sometimes a higher home run rate.
So
Yeah,
that's the trade-off. That's just what the major leagues is. That's the quality of hitter. So, but once you get an idea of when those times are, when being high command is really important, and then got times where you're okay being like a really aggressive team, you're like, I don't have to be great. I'm gonna try to get him to chase all day. I think George Kirby's gonna have that moment where there's days where he's just way outside the zone, but he's getting way more strikeouts. And I think that's the next level in his evolution, just to kind of put it into perspective, because he is right now probably our best power guy with command in the major leagues, kind of by far.
You get the sense that a lot of hitters stepping in against George Kirby are, expecting what you described, pitches in and around the zone. So if he starts to live a little more outside the zone, he's probably going to get good amounts of chase because his stuff's also good too. So
yeah,
that's a great example, I think, of someone that has excellent command and isn't necessarily getting the absolute best possible result with it yet. And the Blake Snell example that you mentioned in passing is something that I tried to hammer on a little bit in the winter. I think people got really fixated. And I used to be like this too with the walk rate. But year over year, Blake Snell, the number of hits he allows is always really low. So it's like, you give something to get something. And in this case, the payoff is absolutely worth it, because part of what makes Blake Snell amazing is his ability to miss bats at an elite clip. So if he's not giving up a ton of hits on top of the walks, it doesn't really matter. And I think we spend a lot less time looking at hits allowed than we do looking at walk rates. And that really skews our analysis for guys that have higher walk rates.
Yeah. I also think of, the Musgrove at bat against Manny Machado, where Manny Machado became the the all-time leader in home runs as a Padre. And he touched George Kirby. Yeah, isn't that kind of surprising? I mean,
crazy.
He hasn't been there like forever. He was an Oriole, like, but he's hit like 160 plus. Like I forget exactly what the number was, and now he's the leader. And in that at bat, George Kirby did not throw Manny Machado a pitch in the zone until he threw a high fastball, and he didn't get it high enough in the zone. And Manny Machado, but I think Manny Machado is also sort of ready for it. He's like, this guy's not going to walk me.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-0 count. He's been outside the zone. I don't know if it was actually 3-0, but because I think Manny Machado swung at some of the pitches outside the zone. But it was a count where I think that that Kirby had to get back in there. But he also knows Kirby likes to go up top in the zone with the fastball. So as soon as he saw the fastball, he knew where it was going to be, and it was it wasn't high enough, so it wasn't outside the zone enough. So he could have thrown. So in other words, Kirby could have thrown not a single ball to Manny Machado in the strike zone and struck him out. And that's what he needs to do more of.
Yeah.
And also not go to the fastball so much for 2 strike counts. I think he throws the fastball in 2 strike counts twice as much as any other pitch.
These all seem like things that George Kirby can figure out on his own and adjust on his own. Like it just,
that's nice.
I have a lot of faith in that.
Him adjusting the other way, like having command and then having to manipulate that command, so much better than having to learn command. So
yeah,
I mean, we'll take that. But like, he's still a 3.5. But like, we all watch him pitch. We're like, this guy should have a 1.9. Like when he's dialed in, if he's like locked in and feeling really good for an entire season, he could put together a season like that because he's got a combination of power and command.
He'll win the Cy Young for sure.
He will. It's just a matter of time. And he is 26. It's his 3rd year. And it's very clear, he's talked about. I've talked to him one time, interviewed him one time, and it is abundantly clear how important it is for him to be able to throw the ball wherever he wants. He takes a crazy amount. Like, pitchers love that, but like, it's the only thing he like. Everything was colored with that. And there's going to be I think a little bit of a release to like, you know what, I'm gonna really lean into my wild self here and just like throw 98 one of these outings and just see that it's okay if I'm not pinpoint command or use my command to throw balls on purpose. That's the next level for him. I just listening to him talk, he's aware of this stuff. He's going to make that adjustment, and he doesn't seem like he's lacking confidence. So it's going to be there. It's just the
he's got a good
league's gonna have to tell him to do it. And that's what's happening, I think.
And he's got a good catcher with Cal Raleigh. So I think, they've known they came up together, and Cal's really smart that way. And so I think I have every confidence he'll get out of it, but it is interesting.
Jump shoot in the live hive. Happy Kumar Rocker Day to those that celebrate. Yeah, indeed. Right. Tonight's matchup is Bryce Miller against Kumar Rocker. So definitely one to tune in for. I think I saw in one of the player updates that we've only had a 72 pitch max so far in the minor league outings for Kumar Rocker. So 80 to 85 pitches probably is where he's going to land. He's been missing a ton of bats. Got through 5 innings last time out at AAA. So
what is your death ball?
What's your prediction for a Kumar Rocker debut line against Trevor's Mariners tonight?
5 innings, 1 earned run on Luke Raley homer.
Raley homer.
And like 8 strikeouts.
That's almost exactly the last time out at AAA. It's 1 run better than what you did against Vegas. All right, you buying that line, Trevor?
Yeah, no, that sounds. I bet you 5. It's probably 5 max, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll say 7 strikeouts, but yeah, one run, 3 hits, a couple of singles, maybe like an isolated Julio double or something.
The fastball has a little bit of dead zone shape, but it's 98. But it's kind of, he might lean into the sinker at some point in his career because it's got that tail on it. So that's why I think a lefty might get him.
It's like that's Luke Raley specifically. I like very specific prediction calls. So
you have to with the Mariners.
Do you know Luke Raley is like one of the best athletes in the game?
Yeah, he's got the fastest sprint speed on their team.
Yeah, I think he was 80th percentile or something last year. I was really surprised when I saw that.
He's huge.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't
Yeah.
think people appreciate Luke Rayleigh as much as they should. It's a strikeout
6'4"
rate.
people who aren't like lean shouldn't be as fast as Luke Rayleigh is.
He's got a little Hunter Pence like awkward, but like then he gets running. You're like, there's no way he's running quick, and then you're like, oh, actually he's moving pretty good. It just looks funny. He's just big
Also
and
like a
hulking. He reminds me of me.
linebacker's body a
A
little
lot
bit.
of shoulders, kind of like
Yeah.
hunched over, and he kind of bounces around. And when he runs, it's not the cleanest looking thing, but he's going, he's moving. So hats off, man. He's good. He's sneaky.
It's funny. It's funny the athletes that we have that have bodies that make us not appreciate how athletic they are. I think that's what hurt Freddie Freeman a little bit early on in his career because it's a little awkward looking, you know.
He's a gangly. He's a big
Yeah.
gangly dude. A little bit. Yeah.
I think
But
even playing first base also just puts you into a bucket where people assume your athleticism is limited because you're playing on the right side of the infield.
Like Joey Votto, that guy was a great athlete, phenomenal
Yeah.
athlete. So
Yeah.
So Trevor mentioned the 9 pocket that George Kirby throws into him. It's the net with 9 sections, right? Just
Yeah.
different targets
Yeah.
you're trying to hit.
Great.
That's
common.
like one of the oldest, maybe one of the oldest drills in baseball. Like,
Yeah.
Right. That's pretty old school. That's probably going back at least to the 90s, maybe even earlier.
Yeah.
But the question we wanted to throw out there today is what unusual training approaches have we seen? So you've had a ton of teammates, Trevor. Eno's been covering the game for a while. We've seen the clips of Paul Skeens with the water tank on his back. We're like, that's kind of new and unusual. I think given how much success Paul Skeens is having, we're probably going to see more water tanks in the near future. But what goes even weirder than that? Stuff that you just looked at and were like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And how could that possibly work?
Well, for me, I learned very early in my career to not take that tone on anything. I would always be like, "Hey, so what is that for?" Like that would be my first question. Like, should I do that? And I've been like that since I was a kid. To be honest, my dad found these things from Tom House in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. We had a big binder where I was subscribed to Tom House very early, like blog. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, what were you doing then that other people found weird?
Oh, well, like the resistance band. So he basically he'd be like, oh, you can buy these bands, or just get to go down to Ace Hardware, go down to the Lowe's and get the surgical tubing because it's just like on a spool. You can cut off whatever and they charge you by the foot. And it's the same stuff. It's like there's different like resistances and stuff. I mean, it's not by pounds or whatever like it is now, but it was similar to that. And you could like do it. So I had it tied to my door in my closet in my house, and I would do my 90s and my normal stuff that everyone I did those till the day I retired. Everyone still does them. They're the basic warm-up stuff. And so I've always been in on that stuff. But some of the weirder things, like a lot of Japanese guys come over and they have very specific like movement pattern stuff. One really interesting cool thing is watched Shintaro Fujinami, where I was like, dude, how do you throw so hard all the time? Right? Like he's big and he's 6'6" and he's strong, yeah, but like he did a lot of work in order to throw hard. It's pretty clear. And a ton of it was like he'd put resistance bands under a kettlebell and then step on the other side and put it in extension. And then he'd have to keep his foot planted. So his way he would do things, he would go through his motion, he would do arm motions and stuff, but he would always have this band fully extended and then foot holding one side and a kettlebell holding the other side to keep like himself anchored in the ground as hard as he could. And I was like, so you just do a bunch of random movements while he was in that position with, I'm like, what is, so
That
you're
sounds
anchoring yourself down. And he's like, yeah, that's like, it's for grounding. It's for strength and the ground. I'm like, everyone should do this. This is great.
that
But
sounds a little bit like this Aroldis Chapman clip we've got. So
yeah.
he's being anchored by his trainer.
Yeah. So see, his whole thing is his foot is very anchored in the ground, but this is after now the Fuji thing. So Fuji's feeling the anchor when he's doing everything. And then now Aroldis is adding movement and adding resistance on the upper body, lower body when he's after he's anchored. So he's like, now I'm anchored. Now let's get strong when we're moving. So it's like the second step. And Fuji did this to like feel that like the whole time his foot's anchored. So then he goes and does all his other stuff. His foot's just going to be anchored when he does it. And that was the point. It's to distract your brain into like doing something naturally, and you got to feel what it feels like and then move on to the next thing. Actually, a great example, and I didn't actually tell you guys about this because I learned about it yesterday after we had our meeting. I reached out to Jeremy Hefner, because I saw a video of Shamanaya. I don't know if you guys have seen Shamanaya's warm-up routine he does now.
Oh yeah.
Into the bullpen before he's warming up. He'll get on one mound because there's 2 mounds in bullpen, so you can get 2 guys in big league parks. He'll go on one side of the mound, the catcher will be on the other one. And so he'll basically what he's doing is because he throws sidewinder, his big thing is getting his sinker up and into righties this year, and he's done it really, really well. And that's big reason why he's so successful. And he needs to feel himself getting his body in position to get the ball that side of the plate because he throws low and he steps across his body and he's big and he's left-handed and it's hard to do. You got to find your release point. So he does that and then he does it the other way to feel that he can go the extreme opposite too. He wants to know that his body will just do what it needs to do an extreme change in target, and then he hones the target. So he goes, it's like Hef called it distraction training.
It's like
training.
Yeah, it's like shocking a little bit. Like
just mix something up or make it bigger. Like just go bigger. Just like instead of trying to like hone it, if you're like, I can't really get that target, just make the targets massive. Tell yourself, I can hit a target. And then you bring it back in.
My son is getting a little bit harder, having a little bit of a harder time with he's stepped up in level in the minor leagues to the juniors now, and the velo's up. And so even the machines, when they're doing the machines on the kids, the velo's up on the machine. And he did a round where he only made like contact a couple times. He's really down on himself. I said, in the next one, I know I keep saying to you, like, you have to start early. I was like, why don't you try one time starting so ridiculously early? Like start swinging before he even puts the ball in the machine, just like shock yourself out of what you're doing now. Like just try something super extreme. That's just super ridiculous and feel how maybe be so early, just be early, find a way to be early and then be like, okay. And that's sort of what Shamanai is doing. Is like, I'm going to do this so far wrong almost. Right.
Yeah.
Like we do so much practice. We're on the mound and we're trying to be fine and do these little places. He's like, no, I'm going to get up here and pitch over there. That's obviously wrong. Like like you wouldn't want to do that, but it shocks your body and be like, okay, this is wrong. And now this is right. And this is the difference in feeling. And
instead of being like, what's wrong with me? It's like, I felt what wrong felt like. And now it's feel what right feels like.
Yeah.
Relief. One thing I do with kids, whenever I get the opportunity to like do a pitching lesson or whatever, one thing that I really love is it's a mental distraction. And I'll literally have them say, when you come set, you are not allowed to throw the pitch until you tell me what pitch you're throwing and where it's going to go. Like out loud. You have to just say it because it feels awkward. It feels weird. It's kind of embarrassing.
And it's wrong for baseball. Like you would never do that.
You shouldn't be like saying it to like something you would never do because you don't want to give it away. But you can do it in a bullpen. And what it turns out is kids don't know. Actually, adults, a lot of adults don't know that their brain is just running all over the place. And sometimes they're just like, this isn't moving well. And they don't have confidence in it for whatever reason. It's very hard to think something and say something else. So it's forcing you to only think about the thing, whether or not you agree with or you're bought in or not, doesn't matter. It's the only thing you're thinking about. And suddenly things start going closer to where they want to go. And then you like, see, that was close. And then they're like, and then confidence comes back and then we're back on it again. So it's like, I did that in AA because I had trouble throwing strikes for a while. And I bet my pitching coach, I'm like, you keep track on a piece of paper and I bet you I'll hit this many out of this many. And that actually led into another thing I would do after my outings where I would go back and rate myself based on command, looking at where I threw it because I can remember my intent. And that was all built through that. So that was just one thing I did that I didn't even really remember. I just remembered I did, but that was something weird. And there was times during my career where I would just say out loud that, all right, we're going fastball. He knows. I know he knows. Let's just, I would say it, talking to myself.
Hey, Brown Francis glove signed his.
I love that.
They couldn't get together on the same page at the time. And the pitch clock was going, and he glove signed curveball before he threw curveball because he just wanted the catcher at least to know what was coming.
Buckled Iglesias because he looked at him like, "Did you just do that? I'm not going to swing when you hit me with one of these. I don't know if you're trying to deke me. I don't want to look like an idiot. So I'm going to stand here." Looked at him like, "That just really happened." But like how Bowden Francis has been throwing.
This was perfect. This is a strike.
I love
what I was talking to DL Hall, and I've got a piece coming out tomorrow about all the changes that DL Hall has made, and I think it's a struggle for young pitchers. I still think that he's near the cusp. He has a lot of the things you want out of a good starting pitcher. And so we were talking about like how his back issues. So his lower back was bad. So when his lower back was bad, as a compensator, I mean, Trevor talks about this all the time. Like as a compensator, he just sort of hunched over, right? Because he didn't want to. When you have back issues, you have lower back issues. You don't want to sit up straight. That takes effort. So he kind of was hunched over, and because he was hunched over, that was doing a lot. He was being more rotational instead of being straight to the plate, and so all this stuff came out of his back. And Casey Mize was saying that a similar thing. And so Mize had back surgery. DL Hall got his back right. And then I was saying, well, that, it reminds me, I'm running a lot and I've got Achilles tendonitis. And part of it is because my ankle collapses, inward. It's kind of like pronating. And he goes, oh, yeah, my ankle does that too. And he goes, I do all sorts of stuff for it. I'm like what? And he's like, well, you sit down at a 90-degree angle on your thing, and you put your feet on the ground, and then you take your toes up one by one, and then you roll your ankle in, you roll your ankle out. And he's like, toe yoga. And I had a moment where I reacted, and I thought of this guy. So you have this Austin Schultz clip. This guy's really funny. He's doing pitching drills where they're just ridiculous. You got to look him up. I mean, he's throwing things around, falling down. He's on a medicine ball, throwing another medicine ball. I mean,
some of this stuff is pretty close.
It's really close.
Hopping up the steps. The last thing he did in the clip, he's hopping up the steps with a water tank on his back. Yeah. And you didn't even realize that he's got a ball in his hand. He gets to the top step and he fires it down into a net. He actually nailed it. How many takes do you think that took to get it right?
Probably one. Yeah. He played minor league baseball till last year. So the guy knows how to play. He doesn't know. He's not a pitcher, but you can tell he's too athletic to be a pitcher. But he's got some of the. I'll be honest, the pitcher drills are the ones that I saw first, and now he's got a bunch of like the catching drills ones might be the best ones.
Catching drills really good.
Like distracting a catcher. He's like, all right, catch the second pitch, and throws two of them. And the guy catches the first one, second one hits him in the chest. He goes, I said the second one.
Austin Schultz on
pretty good. You got to check him out. Yeah,
I'm gonna show him to my kids too, because he does really good like dugout stuff too. Like it's good stuff. But so when he's saying toe yoga, and I tweeted about it, and people were like hot toga and hot toe yoga. I'm like, oh yeah, you got to get those toes hot first. And like
foot bath going.
I had a little bit like I think that, and then this is the reason why I want to bring this up is because I do. I think one of the reasons that I've always connected with Trevor is that we do have this curiosity and we'd want to hear about it. And it usually doesn't come from, but I had just a little moment where I was like, toe yoga, like, come on, and I kind of like a little bit of this. But a lot of the stuff that we do now, at some point looked weird. And we even have a picture. This is Robert Stock. This is actually from 2017. He's doing an ARP wave with a P. And that box is zapping him with electricity to I guess while he's hanging out watching TV with his wife. And it reminded us of the time machine.
The time machine from Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
It's just a mysterious box with a cable running off it. It's attached to his shoulder. So doing little pulses on the shoulder. I get it.
Normal. That's the most normal place he put it. Like he said, he'd have it on his forehead sometimes. I played with Bob Stock as we call him, but he liked to go by Robert. And it's one of those machines he uses for recovery, he uses to warm up. It's the only thing he did. He only used that box.
Yeah. And apparently that was like more popular at some point. You were saying that it's the same technology as the get your abs fit. You put the
I think it's literally the same exact thing as those ab belts.
So like stimulating your abs to get a six pack. But that was like popular and then went out of style. I guess to some extent, replaced a little bit by the kind of the gun massager.
Guns, yeah.
The gun massager that you kind of massage everything. I see that everywhere. But there's some trendiness to this where there's trends, but there's also just that things that we thought were weird, like the resistance bands. Everybody does resistance bands now. Weighted balls are super ubiquitous. And to like look at this and say toe yoga and roll your eyes is to miss an opportunity. Like I actually, after I got over the like initial like toe yoga, I shook his hand and said, "Thank you. Like I have Achilles tendonitis. I should be doing this." Like, so I have a full on plan. Today is my yoga day. I'm going to do some toe yoga too, because, you know, I need to make sure I don't blow out that Achilles. I'm not blowing that thing out in my 40s. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the actual worst injuries you can suffer. I've known a few people that have done that. It's not a fun rehab, very painful injury on top of that as well.
And why would you say, "Oh, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't do that." Like, why, like, especially if you're like a near pro or pro athlete, why
Yeah.
wouldn't you be like, "Yo, what are you doing?"
Yeah.
Like, could
Highly
that
recommend,
help me
guys.
make the pros?
Just try to look for anything you can, and don't worry about how it looks.
I guess it can go too far too. I don't know. Have you heard of muscle activation technique?
I mean, maybe. I don't know if I've heard it called that.
Well, MAT or whatever. I love Matthew Boyd. He's really inquisitive too, and he was looking into this. He was telling me all about muscle activation technique, and, you know, like avocado oil because of the, you know, the different smoke points and all this stuff.
Gotcha.
And so some of the stuff, the science isn't really there on it. You know,
Yeah.
muscle activation technique. The theory is that you have these little muscles that need to be activated, and so you get on the thing, and they like poke you in these little places to be like to like wake the muscle up and make it work. But it turns out that, like, so one thing they do is they're like, look, your range of motion is this. Now I'm going to poke you in these places. Now your range of motion is this. And they did a peer-reviewed study where they're like, your range of motion is this. Now I'm going to slap you in the face. And then look, your range of motion is this. So it turns out that, but in muscle activation technique, they also have this thing called plyometrics. And plyometric exercise. I don't know if I'm getting it exactly right, but it's these smaller exercises where you're like, one of them is like, for one, I was supposed to sit on the ground and like take my foot and just like basically turn it while
Yeah.
but using my like trying to use my small muscles in my groin.
Yeah.
And so there's like these little weird small exercises you can do. And when they did peer reviewed studies on that, they found that the small exercises where you're getting the benefit. But if you go to muscle activation technique, they give you a list of little small exercises to do. So I'm like, if you were curious and you ended up in the wrong place, which is the wrong place, quote unquote, with muscle activation technique, you still got the homework and you were doing the right stuff. So really trying new things is usually not a bad idea.
A guy who does this really well is Francisco Lindor. I don't know if you need to know more about, but like him and I were just like, I'd see a new thing and be like, "Hey man, have you tried this thing?" He's like, "No, I'll get one," and he just try it. And we tried
Really?
all. Yeah, we did all kinds of stuff. I cannot remember what this little bracelet thing that vibrated. Stroman's the same way. So me, him,
Yeah.
and like we would just be like, he'd be like, "Oh, what do you guys got now?" And I'd be like, "Well, I'm gonna put on my ankle bracelet that vibrates and it feels like a cat purring, basically." These things suck. Like they don't do anything. I know that now.
Like the fighting, the fighting.
Kind of, yeah. But these things are like $400 for a little bracelet. It broke constantly. But like you're supposed to go take a nap with it on, and it's supposed to put you in deep relaxation. I would fall really deeply.
Did you ever do it in concert with your Whoop to like see if it did actually do something?
And it was spotty. It was hard to tell what else was affecting it. But it was one of those like, I'll try it because, you know, I'm in the big leagues and I have the money to do it and might as well. Like Ed Reed spent $500,000 a year staying healthy, so I guess I can, you know, buy this thing if it helps.
I guess the dark side of it though is if you're like a kid, like like an adult with a kid in travel ball, and you're maxing out, and you spent $30,000 on gadgets and travel ball and all this stuff for your kid, and he's doing things like in the Austin Schultz drill, and you're just kind of like sitting back being like, yo, how much did I pay for this session? And what is he doing right now on that yoga ball?
You got to have a distinct reason. One last little bit I'll throw on that is my understanding of, we mentioned that I had back issues in 16 and figure those out. Something that didn't dawn on me, but I kind of connected this way is like your body's just a big series of compensations. But we work by, just to put this into perspective, like the tread on like a tank, like a big tread that's going back and forth and moving the thing forward. If that has like ungreased links in there and where they're caught, that tank's going to lurch and move weird. And you're going to be like, oh, that's how your body works. We're just a chain walking forward, a whip walking forward. Whether you're walking, moving, throwing, whatever it is, our bodies, one part of our body moves and then the rest follows it. That's kind of how it works. And so sometimes you just bypass muscles that exist for a reason. And for whatever reason, you don't use them for that. And some other muscle has taken over that. And all of our bodies are full of these things. So in sports, they're just trying to find which one of those things do you have that you're not utilizing. And that's kind of where I think that muscle activation comes from. But then that's why the isolated movements, you're like, oh, see, you don't use this muscle to move your leg and it's supposed to. You would be better if you did, and you don't do it. So let's train you how to do that. That's pretty much what my entire life was before games, was just like hips. It was hips because the hips affected my back, and I was always in back extension. That's why my back hurt. So I had to work on my core, so my core would be strong and pull me forward naturally. I didn't have to think about it. That was part of it. And if I had just left that going, I probably would have ended up getting back surgery. That's probably would have happened, because I would have been locked up. I would have been in a weird position for a really long time, and that's what happens.
Casey Mize had something where he couldn't really feel his blocking leg that well because of like a compressed nerve or something in his back. And it's amazing. He's throwing 94 miles an hour. He can't really feel his blocking leg, right? Yeah. And so when he got Tommy John, they were like, okay, let's do the back surgery and fix that, right? So he comes out of it and, oh, wow, I can now get over my blocking leg. I can slam that thing down better. I can feel it. I can get over it better. And he gets 2 miles an hour. Well, guess what he did? He blew his hamstring on the blocking leg.
Yeah.
Because he's now using it in ways and feeling it in ways that he hadn't before. And he had to kind of find a new equilibrium where he's like, oh, wow, it's like a new toy. He's like, oh, I can feel this hamstring. I can use it, you know? And then he's like, oops, broke it.
If you want a cost you absolutely nothing example of something you can do to sort of repattern a part of your body, go walk backwards. Go outside and walk a couple blocks, even part of one block backwards, and feel just how
it's
different
so weird
your legs and hips and everything are. It's a really good way to like change some patterns of movement. Because
have you seen the Tarzan guys? They walk around on their hands and feet, or they like all fours for a whole day. Try that. If you really want it, like they did backwards before, and then if you really want your body to move like it's supposed to move, that's how we're supposed to.
There's a barefoot runner in my neighborhood that we always like say what's up to each other because we're just always running, and his movements are so different than mine.
Yeah,
because he's
strong.
He has to be more careful, so he's like trying to be very soft in his running. So he has like this kind of a gait where he's like being very soft, and I've got these big shoes that I spent all this money on. So I'm like, bang, 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 bang.
You're crushing concrete out there.
Yeah.
Oh, is he running on concrete too? Oh, well, yeah. Like,
yeah,
dude, that's. Does he do the toe shoes or just straight up barefoot?
Straight up barefoot.
That's bold.
It seems crazy to me. I'm like, what up, crazy dude?
For a long time.
Well, he's probably callous as hell now. It's probably he's still probably developing his calluses. Like the bottom of his feet have to turn into soles of shoes, basically.
I had feet like that growing up in Jamaica. I had feet like that. I used to be able to walk on the the volcanic rock. That's I used to be able to walk on that, no problem.
Yeah, that's tough. It's like walking on razor blades if you're not ready.
Yeah, now it is too. Now I got my little white socked on shoes, socks and shoes feet. Well,
I think we talked about feet as much as we have at any point in the last 5 years on the show today, so that burns off all of that quota. But I had a question for you guys about the playoff picture, and framed it this way. I thought this was pretty brilliant. What would be more surprising, the Tigers making the playoffs or the Braves missing them? As things sit Thursday at the time of this recording, Atlanta's now 1 game out in the NL wildcard race. The Tigers are still 3 out. And as I look at these teams, I'm like, okay, well, Atlanta, even with all the injuries, they still look like a playoff team. The Tigers looked like maybe a playoff team in 2025, but we've talked about some of the futility in the AL wildcard race. The opportunity is there. When I look at the Tigers, I think we're going to learn a lot about them in their next 3 series. They get the Orioles, the Royals, and then the Orioles again. So a home and road with the Orioles, with the Royals sandwiched in between. So if they come through that stretch, they win each of those series, they go like 6-3 in those 9 games. This is real. If they go 3-6 in those 9 games, then we're probably looking ahead to 2025. But I think this is a really interesting stretch. So, Trevor, what's your side? What would surprise you more, Atlanta not making it, or the Tigers actually finding a way into the postseason here in 2024?
I mean, the Tigers. making it would be the most surprising. It would really, really help me out for my preseason predictions. I would appreciate it if they could sneak in. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's likely simply because this is so weird. It's like there's a lot of teams in the playoffs and we have more spots now, but like the three teams in it, um, like the teams chasing need more than one team to collapse, and that's on both sides. And it's kind of interesting in that way. Also having you can't. It's hard to count the Braves out when they've won 7 straight divisions, and no, they're not going to win the division very clearly. But like they still have all those players, so like they have so much experience, and probably going to have Sale win the Cy Young. You just can't count that team out. So I think the Tigers would be the biggest surprise for sure.
The Braves missing though, I think I agree. That's what the numbers say too. I mean, it's 3 games versus 1 game, and all that. But I am surprised by how decimated this team's got. I mean, they go out and get Whit Merrifield, and then Whit Merrifield gets hurt. So right now the infield is Orlando Arcia, Gio Urshela, Kevin Biggio, and Matt Olson. I mean, that's sort of where it's gotten to. The outfield is like Laureano, Soler, and Harris. Like that's none of those people. Laureano and Soler were not on these teams to begin with, so it's really sort of cobbled together. And one thing that I did notice was when I know you can always do this, especially we did this already with Judge and Soto on the Yankees, and like how well the team does when their best players perform well. So you can kind of do this with any team, but Ozuna, when he was going well, the team's offense was going well, and right now he's in a bit of a slump where he's slugging 370 over the last month or so, and oh, look at that, the team slugging is now like 350 over the last month. And in this case it becomes even more of an actual thing, I think, than it does with the Yankees, where it really is right now. Ozuna and Olsen are the guys I'm most afraid of in that lineup. And maybe you can say like Harris and Soler can get it going. Laureano's been okay, but if I'm game planning for this team, it's Ozuna and Olsen I'm worried about. And if I'm game planning, and the rotation is has its own injuries to the point where you don't even know who their 5th starter is right now. So I don't know. I think they could miss it.
I think they could, but I also think the Tigers getting in would still be the bigger surprise for me, because even with that question about the 5th starter, it's Sale, Fried, Schwellenbach, and Morton as the first 4. They could get Albies back. The core around, even with the injuries, right? So you're worried mostly about Ozuna and Olsen as far as how you're going to pitch these guys. Harris could be better the rest of the way. He's been below average up to this point in the season. I don't think anybody really expected that. Soler could go red hot anytime. They still have Sean Murphy, who's also underperformed this year, and they've got a great bullpen. There's still a lot of good pieces there, even with horrible injury luck that we've discussed throughout the year. But the Tigers trade away Jack Flaherty and are just kind of patching it together with some guys making their first run of starts in the big leagues, and somehow have done enough.
Their rotation is not in great shape either.
It's way, way worse in terms of names that you would trust at the very least. They could get Reese Olson back. He's having a nice little run through
right now. Like there's like a Tyler Madden, Brent Herter, Kenta May. Like I don't know. There's like a patch it together in 2 spots of the rotation right now. So
yeah, and even like as they've kind of helped close this gap recently, they still have a bottom 10 lineup by WRC plus. They've been bottom 10 all season, but even in the second half of the season, it hasn't been much better than that. So that's the other part that surprised me. I would have figured they were closer to the league average, running well in that facet, and they really haven't been. So I think the reality check is coming in these next 3 series, the 2 against the Orioles, the 1 against the Royals. Braves' schedule is pretty tough on the way out, too. They have 4 against the Dodgers, 3 at Cincinnati, 3 at the Marlins, not bad, but then 3 against the Mets and 3 against the Royals. So
there's one split where the Tigers' offense isn't so bad.
What's that?
Last 30 days.
Oh, you cut it down to the last 30 days.
7th. And well, listen, I know that's a joke, but a lot's happened in the last 30 days because Parker Meadows was in the minor leagues, Trace Sweeney was not on this team, and Kerry Carpenter was injured, so those are 3 players that I think have really made this lineup a lot better since they've been included. I think, I'm starting to, I think I agree generally I think that this is more a team that next year, I think they can easily go out and buy some pitchers in the sort of Alex Cobb variety where they buy some 4th and 5th starters, and they still have Skubal and Olsen moves up a spot, but the lineup's coming together. I think Trey Sweeney, I don't know if he's this good, but he looks like a starter at shortstop in the major leagues, and Vierling is everything that that they wanted when they traded for him, and Parker Meadows looks like a starter in center field. So they're starting to look good up the middle and have some other guys, and Riley Green looks like a stud, honestly. So I think that they're really coming together in a lot of ways that weren't so obvious even at the beginning of the season or last year. So just wanted to kind of highlight them as a team because so much has gone right for them.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, though, about some of the guys they got back from injuries and the couple of call-ups maybe making that lineup look a little bit different in this last 30-day window than in the second half of the season overall. Let's get to our third installment of Name That Dude. Season tally so far, Trevor 2, Eno 0. The game works like this. I provide a series of clues about a mystery player. Eno and Trevor try to identify that player. First player to guess correctly wins. Really simple game, really fun game, kind of addictive, and people can play along as they're listening and watching. So we have today a position player drafted 3 times, drafted for the final time in the 29th round of the 2000 draft out of Seminole State College.
How do we not know you now?
How'd you not get that? All right. I made my debut.
Drafted 3 times? Wait, why drafted 3 times?
Drafted 3 times because of high school, junior college. Just draft eligible every time. So made my major league debut April 7th, 2004. I hit 255 career home runs and made my big league debut with Atlanta. It's an important extra detail.
Ryan Klesko?
Not Ryan Klesko. Trevor, would you like to guess?
No.
David Justice.
No. So, other teams I played for included the Pirates, Red Sox, Diamondbacks, Nationals, and White Sox.
Adam LaRoche.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I was going to say Andy LaRoche.
I got one.
Wow.
You should have been, and you retired because they wouldn't let your kid in the clubhouse.
Yeah. I mean, that was going to be the throwaway clue, and Jesus,
the only guy I ever blew a changeup by, guys.
Really?
Yeah. There's a good one. One of my early strikeouts. He was like,
how's that happen? Sitting changeup, and it got.
I don't know. I think it was just an emergent. Like it was like he was like determining whether or not it was too high or not. So he was just like.
Oh, he realized it was in the zone at some point?
Yeah. It was just one of those weird cop between. Yeah. He's like, well, that happened.
Live Hive's happy for you. They're Perry's got your back.
I didn't know he got up with the Braves. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the other clue I didn't
when you said Braves Pirates, it clicked for me.
Yeah, the combination of teams in the era makes sense. But the one clue that I didn't know this about Adam LaRoche, he won a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger in the same season back in 2012.
Really?
That was kind of the really good year that was even better than I expected. It was like, wow.
I talked to him once.
Yeah.
He had the really open stance, and I talked to him if that was like good for facing lefties so he could get 2 eyes on the ball. I remember having that conversation with him, and he was like, yeah, maybe. But I was thinking about something real quick. Trevor, you were saying that guys whose front leg, when they're in their batting stance, guys whose front leg is back.
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing these more. So what were you saying about them? You're saying that like you knew how to pitch them, or like if you saw that the front leg was back, there was something that you thought you could do to them.
The front leg back?
Like open, like really open stance.
Open?
Yeah, the front leg is not parallel with their, the front leg is back, like they're open.
Oh, I don't remember. When was this?
I don't know if I'm saying the right word for back. You know what I mean? Like if I'm standing at the plate, both my feet are like this.
It's like
yeah.
On the line, it's back. They have an open stance.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what I would have said for that.
I thought you said something like maybe you actually want to bust those guys inside.
Oh yeah. Or guys who do that and are way off the plate also. They act like they act like they want you to throw them away, and they actually want you to throw them away. Oh, who did this? Great example of this is the opposite. He would be close to the plate and he would open up a little bit. Howie Kendrick would be like, "Hey, I'm really up on the plate. Throw me in." He wanted down and in so he could take it oppo. Like he was just one of those weird. He loved that pitch, but the way he came up to plate, if you didn't know anything about him, you'd be like, "Oh, obviously, you run sinkers down and into this guy because he's open." And then he'd go really close, so he'd be like, open a little bit and then drift close, and so he'd be like, "Oh, I can get in." And he'd be like, "No, I actually want you to throw it in there," and that's all part of
that's what. Yeah. So
I've been do that too.
I've been watching. I've been seeing. I think I've been seeing the pitchers mostly when those guys are really open, drifting to close. They actually try to bust those guys inside.
Yeah.
But I've also seen guys who do that where they're open and they drift to close, like turn on those pitches inside and like even foul them.
Yeah.
Like actually be able to turn on them.
And a lot of times guys are just doing that and they actually can't hit the ball away. And that's a major problem. And they just don't fix it.
Yuli Gurriel, I think, is a guy that is pretty open but can crush the inside stuff, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've
he's
ever
really
seen splits on the
close.
way.
So he was really closed, and like
right.
it looked like how is he going to get his hands up and in?
That's
and he
what
could
it was.
Crush up and in.
Yeah, he could destroy those pitches in, and it didn't look like he could. It made no sense whatsoever. So
the
he's probably like giving you a cue, like I don't want this pitch in, but actually I do, and I can hammer the crap out of it.
Common with them. They have guys that
the Astros love guys who can crush up and in.
Yeah,
like if they're in their heyday, they could all do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of ground, talked a lot about feet, hot toe yoga, all the rage, George Kirby, Cy Young coming in 2025. So a lot of good stuff in here. Give us a follow on Twitter. You can find Trevor at I am Trevor May. Find Eno at Eno Sarris. Find me at Derek VanRiper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description. That's the best way to send us questions for a future episode. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this one. We are back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.